Birmingham police are investigating the city's 15th murder of 2024.
Well, this started out as a missing persons case yesterday, but before Mahogany Jackson's friends and family could even get out and search for her today, it turned into a homicide.
The Birmingham Police Department announces 7 arrests have been made in the Mahogany Jackson homicide investigation.
At first, it looked like just another missing person case. The next morning, it was a homicide. And within hours, she only wanted a better life for her child. What she got instead was 30 hours of hell. They hadn't just killed a woman, they snatched a mother from a child. In the shadows of Alabama, a young mother's plea for hope turned into a nightmare of violence, torment, and betrayal. It was the early hours of February 26, 2024, when Birmingham's South Precinct officers were dispatched to a vacant house on Laurel Avenue. The 1700 block was dark, still, and mostly silent until that call. A person had been found lying beside the home. When officers arrived, they discovered the body of a young woman, face down near the rear of the property, partially in the grass. She was unresponsive. There was no pulse, and somewhere a child had just lost their mother without warning, without goodbye.
Just after 2 a.m., South Precinct officers received a call of a deceased person. When officers arrived on the scene, they observed an adult female lying unresponsive, suffering from an apparent gunshot wound. Birmingham Fire and Rescue arrived on the scene and pronounced the victim deceased.
That woman was 20-year-old Mahogany Jackson. At first glance, it wasn't clear what had happened. She had no ID on her, and the scene was oddly clean. No signs of a struggle, no witnesses waiting around. Just a lifeless body by a forgotten property in the dead of night. Officers secured the area immediately. Yellow tape was drawn around the house and yard. Flashing lights painted the block red and blue. Forensics began their quiet work under dim street lamps and early morning fog. As the sun rose, the outline of the tragedy sharpened. Mahogany's phone wasn't found on her. Her shoes were off. It appeared she had been brought there, not fallen. The location raised immediate suspicion. This wasn't where someone just wandered. Someone had chosen this spot. Someone had left her here. Within hours, homicide detectives took over. The tone shifted. This wasn't accidental. The focus was now on tracking who brought Mahogany to that house and why. Investigators began canvassing the area, but neighbors reported hearing nothing. No screams, no shots, just silence.
Officers and detectives discovered Mahogany's body in the 1700 block of Laurel Avenue. Investigators determined that she had been shot. With assistance from the community, detectives were not only able to locate Mahogany Jackson's body, but detectives took 7 suspects responsible for Mahogany's murder into custody within 48 hours of this investigation.
To outsiders, it looked like a textbook scene, a quiet drop-off in a forgotten part of town. But for the police, the details weren't adding up. Who was with her that night? Why had no one come forward? And perhaps the most haunting question, was Mahogany alive when she was left there? As detectives dug deeper, they would find a twisted story of betrayal, control, and a chilling final message that would lead them straight to the people responsible. Before she was found, Mahogany was taken into apartment 3, a place she thought would be safe. That decision marked the beginning of her ordeal. Investigators later confirmed that the people inside the unit knew her, and she entered voluntarily. She thought she was meeting people she knew, people she trusted. But inside, what happened next became the most harrowing part of this case.
And one of the saddest details I learned today is that Mahogany Jackson came to the first location thinking these people were her friends. Investigators say they then her, and the things that were described are why Judge Keisha Davis says she denied all of these suspects a bond.
These few seconds in the clip deliver the weight of that moment, where trust turned into terror. Based on testimony from preliminary hearings, Mahogany endured hours of physical and sexual violence. Parts of her assault were recorded by those present. One detective described the videos as deplorable and sickening, recorded by the very people who had attacked her. Footage captured her being forced to remove her clothing and restrained outside another home before even arriving at apartment 3. The real nightmare began the moment Mahogany stepped inside apartment 3.
We have determined that Mahogany was a victim of sexual assault with murder and kidnapping.
Inside apartment 3, the abuse reportedly continued. Mahogany was restrained with handcuffs, slapped, spat on, and struck with a firearm. She was also allegedly forced to engage in degrading acts while being threatened. But the people behind this had more in mind. They weren't just hurting her, they wanted to embarrass her even more. Investigators say they even recorded what happened on video, as if they wanted others to see it too. In one video, a person told her to hurry up because someone else was waiting, a chilling indication of how many people were involved. The assault was emotionless and methodical. The district attorney called it unbearable, saying it felt animalistic when played back in court. The violence continued through the night. At one point, 2 people were recorded stomping on her while she was outside. One voice can be heard saying, "Put her in the trunk," signaling a planned move to relocate her. There's no proof that she started anything or caused the attack. Instead, she lost all control over the situation and was forced to obey the people who recorded her suffering. For much of the time she spent in that apartment, she was tied up and threatened with a gun. By the early morning of the next day, after the final video was recorded, investigators believe Mahogany was shot in the back of the head. Authorities say that most likely the action was execution style. She was then placed in the trunk of a vehicle, taken to a remote area of southwest Birmingham, about 2.5 miles from apartment 3, and left near a residential stretch known by locals as a dumping site. Investigators later confirmed that they recovered multiple videos, up to 8, clearly depicting the assault and her final hours. These videos were submitted by an acquaintance who provided them to the authorities and directed them to Mahogany's body site. The videos formed the backbone of the case and helped secure arrest warrants within 48 hours of Mahogany's death. That's not all. The investigation is far from over. While at least 2 guns were found at the scenes and linked to suspects, the exact weapon used in the murder hasn't been confirmed publicly. Detectives are still digging through phones and other digital clues, trying to piece together a clear timeline of what really happened inside apartment 3 and when. But what the documents reveal next is even more chilling. Court records confirm this wasn't a random act. It was a planned, multi-location nightmare. Mahogany was held against her will, abused, and filmed before her tragic death. The apartment she mentioned in her final text, the one she begged to be rescued from, wasn't a safe place. It became the main stage where her final hours unfolded. But this wasn't a sudden panic. Just a day before Mahogany's body was discovered on Laurel Avenue, something chilling had already happened, something only her family knew at the time. That Sunday morning, Mahogany reached a breaking point. Her mother, Crystal Lee, and sister, Brianna, had both been trying to reach her in the days prior, but she hadn't responded. Then, out of nowhere, a text. 5 short sentences that would tear their world apart. It read, "I'm being held hostage in apartment 3. Don't call. Send the police. Hurry."
That was when she actually called my daughter and sent me a text message. So, and I knew something wasn't right because if you know Mahogany, she's not the type of person to call and ask for help. So for her to send the message that she did, I knew she was in trouble. I'm being held hostage in apartment 3. Don't call, send the police, hurry.
It wasn't a spontaneous message fired off in fear. It was the result of something that had clearly been escalating behind closed doors. Sadly, it didn't come hours before her death. It came shortly before everything unraveled, a deliberate signal from someone who knew she had no more time to wait. But why didn't she contact them earlier? Mahogany was not unreachable because she didn't want to talk. She was being held in a place where speaking might have made things worse. Her message was clearly signaling not to panic and waste time, but just act. But what happened after the message remains just as haunting. No record confirms that law enforcement arrived in time based solely on that text. By the time officers were on scene later that day, it was already a death investigation. That small window between the message and discovery is still filled with questions. What if someone had arrived sooner? What exactly was happening behind that door when she hit send? This message was a clear countdown, one that ended in silence. But the question remains, was this text the only thing she managed to send out? Were there earlier signs missed by those around her? As the case unfolds further, what comes next will only add to the weight of this moment. Because this message wasn't sent from just anywhere. The apartment it pointed to wasn't random, and the man who lived there, Mahogany's ex, was about to be at the center of everything. The question that became the center of the case: how did it all begin? Why did she go to Brandon Pope's house that night? And how did it lead to apartment 3? She didn't go looking for danger, she went demanding answers. But what kind of answers could drive someone straight into the heart of chaos? On the evening of February 24th, Mahogany Jackson voluntarily went to Brandon Pope's home. She believed he was hiding a firearm that had recently been stolen from her. Court testimony later revealed she had taken a gun from another person in the group, Jeremiah Kodak McDowell, and was trying to figure out who had taken hers. At one point, she even told Pope to strip and prove he wasn't hiding it. That one act changed everything. But humiliation can be deadly fuel, and what happened next proves it. Feeling humiliated, Pope reportedly turned to the group and said something chilling. "Kill her or do something to her. That B made me strip." Detective Mark Green believes this is the moment that triggered the series of brutal events that followed. And from that point on, Mahogany wasn't just a visitor, she became a target. All the chain of acts started outside the Pope's house. But that was just the beginning. She was then dragged by her hair, stuffed into the trunk of a car, and taken to a second location, Serenity Apartments. This was where Taja Lewis and Sania McCall lived. But it wasn't a place of safety. It became the nightmare's second act. And then from there, she was moved to apartment 3. According to court documents, Frances Ace Harris later executed her, shooting her in the head. Her body was dumped between 2 mattresses in an abandoned Birmingham lot, left like trash. But behind the headlines was a young woman trying to change. She walked in seeking justice. Instead, she became the victim of one of Birmingham's most disturbing crimes. They weren't just 1 or 2 people, not even 3. There were 8 of them. 8 people are now charged with turning one woman's desperate search for justice into an unimaginable nightmare. Among them were 4 men and 4 women. Frances Ace Harris, the man police say pulled the trigger, just 22 years old, and the one accused of ending Mahogany Jackson's life with a bullet to the head. Then, Taja Lewis, 21, and Sania McCall, 18, shared more than just an apartment. They're accused of sharing responsibility for what happened inside apartment 3. That was their place, the place where Mahogany was held, humiliated, and brutalized on camera. Then there's Jeremiah Kodak McDowell, whose name keeps surfacing again and again. He's the one Mahogany allegedly took a gun from earlier. He's also the one prosecutors believe helped orchestrate the retaliation. Alongside him, Brandon Pope, Mahogany's ex, the man whose house she went to that night, perhaps thinking she'd be safe. But instead, according to court testimony, he's the one who uttered the chilling words that set everything in motion. Kill her or do something to her. The others, Jalen Harris, Javante Dillard, and Brianna Owens, each charged, each allegedly involved in some part of Mahogany's final hours. Some of them were supposed to be her friends. That's what makes this case even harder to swallow. These weren't strangers. These were people she knew, people she once trusted. When the news broke, Birmingham's community didn't just react, they erupted. Outrage poured in from every corner of the city. How could so many young people, many barely in their 20s, commit something so cold, so coordinated, and so cruel? Residents couldn't understand how anyone, let alone a group this large, could participate in something so savage. But what shocked people even more was how fast the arrest came. Once that text message hit Mahogany's mother's phone, the clock started ticking. Investigators acted quickly. Within days, law enforcement pieced together surveillance footage, social media posts, and cell phone records to track down the suspects. 8 arrests, 8 capital charges, 8 alleged accomplices in a crime that has shaken an entire city. And yet, the biggest question remains: how did so many people become capable of this? This wasn't some petty crime spiraling out of control. The law sees it for what it is: a brutal, coordinated ambush with the weight of justice pressing hard against every single name involved. From the very beginning, the charges came down fast and hard. Capital murder, the most serious accusation under Alabama law, sits at the top of the list. That alone opens the door to the harshest penalties available: life without parole, or even the death penalty. But that's just the start. These aren't single-count indictments. Prosecutors have stacked on charges of first-degree kidnapping, conspiracy, and for some, sodomy and torture, each count echoing the horrors Mahogany endured before her final moments. This isn't about a single act of violence. It's about a sustained campaign of terror, and the court isn't treating them all the same. Among the accused, 2 are minors, and the distinction matters. Legally, juveniles can't be sentenced to death in Alabama, no matter the brutality of the crime. But that doesn't mean leniency. Prosecutors are pursuing life without parole for them, essentially the harshest sentence the law allows for kids tried as adults. One legal analyst, commenting anonymously to local news, said, "The volume and severity of these charges indicate prosecutors are aiming to make an example out of this case. They're not just prosecuting a murder, they're prosecuting terror." And as if the charges weren't staggering enough, the courtroom itself tells a story. At a recent hearing, captured in footage from inside the Montgomery courtroom, you can feel the tension.
Now, court lasted no longer than 30 minutes, and during that time, all 8 of the defendants' legal teams stood before the judge to give them an update on the case, but there's still a long way to go before it reaches trial.
Within half an hour, 8 separate defense attorneys stood before the judge. 8 legal strategies. 8 people now bound together by one of the most disturbing murder cases in recent Alabama history. The process ahead is massive. Investigators are still combing through digital evidence, phones, messages, and recordings that could reshape who gets hit hardest when it all goes to trial. Some defense teams have begun arguing that their clients were less involved or manipulated by others, hinting at possible plea deals. Others seem ready to fight all the way, and here's where it gets even more complicated. The legal machinery moves slowly. Court dates are being set, but trials like this spanning multiple defendants and involving such serious charges can stretch for months, even years. There's talk of severing the cases, trying some together and some apart, which could delay things even further. Still, the pressure on the prosecution is immense. With public outrage so loud and the victim's story so haunting, anything short of full accountability could spark backlash. The state knows that eyes are watching not just in Montgomery, but across the country.
Gail Shearer says these suspects laughed as they tortured her daughter, and she didn't have a judge nor a jury. All she wants now is justice for Mahogany. Prosecutors say the suspects recorded a lot of what happened to Mahogany, including her being beaten and sexually assaulted.
Right now, all 8 remain behind bars, held without bond. Their mugshots may blur together for the public, but the court will decide one by one who planned, who acted, and who simply watched. And in a case like this complex, even watching may carry a life sentence. The legal fallout from Mahogany Jackson's murder isn't just about punishment, it's about precedent. It's about how a justice system responds when a young woman's life is destroyed not by one evil act, but by a group that, prosecutors argue, worked together to make it happen. And for now, the courtroom door remains closed to closure because this story, legally, is just getting started. Sometimes justice comes with handcuffs, but healing takes much longer. When Mahogany Jackson's body was finally found, dumped like she didn't matter, it shattered more than just one family. It sent shockwaves through the entire community of Ensley. Her mother broke down outside the courthouse, barely able to speak between sobs. Her sister, the same one Mahogany had texted for help that night, was the first to speak publicly after the arrests. In a voice trembling with exhaustion and rage, she said, "My baby sister didn't deserve to die like that. None of this should have ever happened." And while the pain was heavy, the arrests brought a moment of resolve.
This case highlights the strength and the effectiveness of the partnership between the Birmingham Police Department and our community, as 7 suspects are now behind the bars and will soon be in custody of the Jefferson County Jail with no bond.
It was the kind of update that gave the community a breath of relief, even if only for a moment. In Ensley, grief took shape as prayer circles, candlelight vigils, and nights where neighbors came together just to sit and cry. Outside the apartment where she was last seen alive, dozens gathered with candles, holding signs that read, "Justice for Mahogany, and she was just 20. They lit candles not just for her, but for every young Black woman whose story fades too quickly. They sang, they prayed, they wept. Mothers held their daughters a little closer that night. Her high school friends posted tributes. sharing selfies, dance videos, voice notes, memories frozen in time. The hashtag Justice for Mahogany started appearing in bios, pinned posts, reels. What started as grief turned into a community refusing to let her name be forgotten. And through it all, her family keeps showing up to every court date, every vigil, every interview. Mahogany's mother said in one statement, "We're not okay. We'll never be okay, but we're here. We'll keep being here." Because when something like this happens in your own backyard, it changes the air. You breathe a little differently, you sleep a little lighter, and you never stop asking, how could this happen to her and here? Before she became a name on the news, Mahogany Jackson was just a girl trying to make a life for herself, one dream at a time. At 20 years old, she was the kind of person who made friends instantly. People say she had an energy that filled a room, but she also carried a quiet strength, like someone who had already been through more than most her age. She was also a mother, young, determined, and doing her best to give her baby the life she never had. Her TikTok videos were a mix of funny voiceovers, makeup routines, and little motivational pep talks. Her family says she had big plans. She wanted to study nursing, maybe even become a pediatric nurse. She loved kids and had always been the one to patch up scraped knees or give the best hugs at family cookouts. She lived in Birmingham but stayed connected with old friends across the state. But even in the face of that betrayal, her story has become more than just a crime. It's become a call for awareness, a rallying cry about who we protect and who we ignore. Mahogany Jackson didn't get the chance to grow into the woman she was becoming, but her name lives on, in hashtags, in vigils, in community panels discussing how to keep young women safe. She was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and now she's a voice, one that refuses to be silenced. 7 are behind bars, a young life is lost, and a whole city is grieving. But in this case, it's not done revealing its secrets. How does a killing like this involve 8 people, and yet no one steps in to stop it? Was this just a group gone wrong? Or was there someone pulling strings in the background? And one of the most triggering questions, why did they move her body across state lines? What else were they trying to erase? In the next episode, we uncover chilling patterns in their social media posts, dig into their digital footprints, and explore whether this was really a one-time act of violence or part of something much darker.